In the quiet village of Akala, nestled between rolling hills and endless savannas, lived a boy named Kofi who thought he knew better than anyone else. Stubborn and headstrong, Kofi ignored the advice of his parents and the wise village elder, believing he could navigate the world on his own terms. But when he ventures into the mysterious forest along a hidden path, his defiance leads him into a series of dangerous trials, getting lost, chased by angry bees, and trapped in a hidden pit. Alone and scared, Kofi learns the hard truth about the importance of listening and respecting those who care for him. As the village faces a terrible drought, Kofi's newfound wisdom drives him to seek a hidden spring that could save his people. Through courage, humility, and a willingness to learn, Kofi transforms from the boy who never listened into a wise leader whose story will be told for generations. This is a timeless tale of growth, respect, and the power of listening, the lessons we all need to hear before it's too late. So grab your popcorn, sit back, and get ready for one of the most powerful stories you've ever heard. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to support more inspiring stories like this one. In the heart of a vast land where golden savannas stretched to meet the sky, there lay a small village called Akala. The people of Akala were known for their laughter, hard work, and deep respect for tradition. Every morning, the village would awaken to the sound of crowing roosters, the pounding of yam, and the songs of women heading to the stream. The homes in Akala were made of red clay and thatched roofs, strong enough to hold back the rains and cool enough to offer shade from the hot sun. Children played in the dusty streets, goats bleated in the distance, and the elders sat beneath the great iroko tree, telling stories and sharing wisdom with anyone who cared to listen. Akala was more than just a village, it was a family. Everyone knew one another, and no child went hungry or unloved. But as peaceful and united as Akala was, every village has its troubles, and Akala's trouble had a name: Kofi. Kofi was a bright-eyed boy with a strong voice and a stronger will. He ran faster than most boys his age, climbed the tallest trees, and always had clever words ready on his tongue. But what made Kofi famous in Akala wasn't his speed or his smarts, it was his refusal to listen. His mother, Amma, would say, "Kofi, don't go near the river when the sun is setting," and Kofi would be back soaked and muddy, grinning from ear to ear. His father, Kojo, would warn, "Leave the goats alone when they're feeding," but Kofi would be chasing them around the pen within minutes. The elders shook their heads. "That boy has ears, but he does not use them," they would say. Still, the village loved him. He was full of life, full of energy. Many believed he would grow into a great man someday if only he could learn to listen. But Kofi didn't think he needed anyone's advice. He believed he knew everything he needed to know. Why listen when he could learn things on his own? Little did he know that life was preparing a lesson he would never forget. Kofi was only 10 years old, but his stubbornness made him seem much older. His mother often said, "This boy has the head of a man but the heart of a child." No matter how many times she corrected him, he found new ways to break rules and dodge chores. When his friends were busy helping their parents on the farms, Kofi would sneak away into the woods with a sling and a pocket full of stones. He'd aim at mangoes, squirrels, or anything that moved. He loved the thrill of adventure and the feeling of being free. To him, rules were chains, and advice was noise. One morning, his father asked him to fetch water from the stream before the sun got too hot. "Kofi," he said, handing him a clay pot, "go quickly and return. Don't stop to play." Kofi nodded with a smirk. "Yes, Papa," he replied. But no sooner had he left the compound than he found himself chasing a butterfly through the tall grass, forgetting all about the pot and the stream. By the time he remembered, the sun was already high, and the pot had slipped from his hand and shattered on the ground. When he returned home empty-handed and dusty, his mother scolded him. "Kofi, why can't you ever do as you're told?" He shrugged. "It's just a pot. We have more," but it wasn't about the pot. It was the habit always doing what he wanted, never thinking of the consequences. Even the village elder, Nana Aku, had tried to help. One evening, He called Kofi to sit beside him beneath the great iroko tree. The old man's face was full of lines, each one carved by years of wisdom. "Kofi," he said, "do you know the story of the goat that refused to listen?" Kofi shook his head, his eyes already wandering. Nana Aku sighed. "A goat who does not hear the shepherd's voice will soon feel the butcher's knife." Kofi laughed. "That's just an old story, Nana." "Yes," the elder replied. "And old stories often carry the newest truths." But Kofi's heart was not ready. He believed he was too clever to end up in danger. He didn't know that life was watching, waiting patiently to show him the truth. The sun was setting over Akala, casting long shadows across the village square. The elders were gathered beneath the iroko tree, their voices soft and thoughtful as they shared stories. Kofi sat nearby, pretending to listen while picking at the dry earth with a stick. Nana Aku, the oldest and wisest man in Akala, noticed the boy's wandering eyes. His beard was as white as cotton, and his walking stick had grooves carved from decades of use. He tapped the ground gently and said, "Kofi, come closer." Reluctantly, Kofi shuffled forward and sat beside him. "I've told you before, young one," Nana Aku began, his voice calm and deep, "that there is danger in ignoring wisdom. But today, I will tell you a story I have never shared with any other child." That caught Kofi's attention just a little. Nana Aku looked out into the distance. Long ago, the river god Mami Wata blessed our land with water, fish, and life. But the people became proud and forgot to show gratitude. They stopped listening to the signs and warnings. One day, Mami Wata sent a messenger in the form of a talking fish. The fish swam up to the shore and said, "Tell the people to stop poisoning the waters, or I will leave this land." But the people laughed. They said, "A talking fish? Nonsense." 3 moons later, the river dried up. Crops withered. Fish disappeared. The people suffered. Kofi blinked. "That's just a tale, Nana." "Maybe," Nana Aku replied. "But tales are lessons dressed in story. We tell them so you don't have to suffer the truth." Kofi shrugged. "I'll remember it." But in his heart, he didn't believe it mattered. The woods were calling him, and the excitement of the harvest festival was growing. He thought of drumming, dancing, and games, not old men and their warnings. Nana Aku studied Kofi's face and gave a tired smile. "One day, Kofi, you will wish you had listened. Not because I was right, but because life will teach you in a way I hope to spare you." The fire crackled beside them. Night had fallen, and the stars blinked overhead like distant eyes watching in silence. Kofi yawned, stood up, and wandered home. But the words of the elder followed him like the wind, whispering through the trees. As the days passed, the air in Akala began to change. The winds carried the smell of ripe crops, roasted corn, and spicy stew. Laughter echoed from every corner of the village. The harvest festival was only a few days away, and everyone was busy preparing. The women dyed colorful fabrics, the men repaired drums and carved masks, and the children practiced dances and songs taught by the elders. The village sparkled with joy, every hut decorated, every path swept clean. Kofi, too, was excited. He had been dreaming of this moment for weeks. He wanted to dance in the masquerade, eat roasted yam with honey, and beat the biggest drum. His imagination soared like a bird. He even told his friends he might lead the dance this year. But while others worked hard to prepare, Kofi's excitement got in the way of responsibility. "Kofi, help me carry this basket of yams to the shed," his mother said one morning. "In a minute, Mama," he replied, chasing after a lizard with a stick. "Kofi, sweep the compound before the visitors arrive," his father ordered the next day. "Yes, Papa," Kofi said, then disappeared into the woods, looking for feathers to decorate his costume. The village children noticed. "You'll miss the festival if you don't help," said Amaho, a girl his age with bright eyes and a sharper mind. "They won't let you dance if you don't learn the steps," added Quame, another friend. But Kofi only laughed. "I'm Kofi. They'll beg me to join. I'll be the star of the whole celebration." That evening, while the other children practiced near the fireside, Kofi snuck away to the tall grass, chasing shadows and collecting shiny stones. He imagined himself wearing a grand mask, twirling to the beat of the drums, the whole village clapping for him. He didn't need practice. He didn't need chores. He only needed to show up and shine. But what Kofi didn't know was that the world had begun to take notice not of his dreams, but of his pride. Some lessons are whispered by elders, others are written in pain. And for Kofi, the real festival hadn't begun, it was still waiting, deep in the woods, with a path he would soon find. The morning sun rose high over Akala, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. The village buzzed with movement as preparations for the harvest festival entered their final days. While everyone worked together in the fields, Kofi remained the same, playful, distracted, and careless. His parents had grown tired of repeating themselves. "This is your last chance, Kofi," his father warned one morning. "Today, you will help me and your mother clear the weeds from the cassava field. No games, no wandering." Kofi nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He had found a feather the day before, bright red with black tips, and he couldn't wait to show it off to his friends. They arrived at the field just as the dew was drying on the leaves. The crops were healthy, but the weeds had begun to grow wild between them. It was back-breaking work, pulling them out by hand and clearing space for harvest. Kofi worked for a little while, just long enough for his parents to think he was focused. But then he saw a grasshopper leap into the bushes, and that was all it took. He dropped his hoe, looked around, and silently slipped away. "Kofi," his mother called, noticing his absence. "Kofi," but the boy was already gone, ducking through the tall grass, chasing the sound of chirping crickets and the flutter of butterfly wings. He wandered farther than usual, deeper into the edge of the woods. There, he stumbled upon something strange, a narrow path hidden behind thick vines. It looked as though no one had walked it in years. His heart raced with curiosity. He paused for a moment. A breeze rustled the leaves above him. "I shouldn't," he whispered, but of course, he did. As he stepped onto the hidden path, the sounds of the village faded. The trees grew taller, the shadows deeper. A strange silence filled the air, broken only by the rustle of his own footsteps. Back in the fields, his parents searched in every direction, calling his name with growing worry. "Kofi," but Kofi was already far from the safety of home, on a path that would change everything. Kofi pushed aside the vines and stepped onto the narrow path that curled into the heart of the forest like a snake. The air was cooler here, thick with the scent of damp earth and wild flowers. Sunlight struggled to pierce through the canopy above, leaving the trail bathed in shadows. At first, the path seemed magical. Bright butterflies danced in the air. Birds with colorful feathers sang from the trees. The breeze whispered softly, as if welcoming him. Kofi grinned. "Maybe this is where the spirits of the forest live," he thought, amused by the old stories his grandmother used to tell. He walked on, further and further, no thought of time or danger. The deeper he went, the quieter the forest became. The songs of the birds faded. The wind stilled. Even the buzzing of insects disappeared. A strange feeling crept over him, like unseen eyes were watching. Then he saw her. An old woman stood in the middle of the path, draped in a cloak of dark green leaves. Her hair was silver, braided with twigs and beads, and her eyes were like glass, cold, still and deep. She leaned on a crooked wooden staff, motionless. Kofi froze. "Where are you going, child?" she asked, her voice low and crackling like dry wood. I was just walking," Kofi stammered. "Exploring." She tilted her head. "Did your elders tell you to come here?" "No, but I can go wherever I want." The old woman's eyes narrowed. "Many before you have said those words. Most never returned." Kofi laughed nervously. "Are you trying to scare me? My village is right over there. I'll go back when I'm ready." She shook her head slowly. "The woods remember every footstep, and the forest doesn't take kindly to those who ignore warnings." Kofi frowned. "I'm not afraid." "Then you are already lost," she whispered. Before Kofi could speak, she turned and vanished into the trees, as if swallowed by the forest itself. He stood there, heart beating fast. The silence around him now felt heavier, thicker. Still, He refused to turn back. I don't need her silly warnings, he muttered, forcing a grin. I'll find something amazing. Then everyone will listen to me for once. And so, he walked on deeper into the woods, deeper into the lesson that life had prepared. Kofi's footsteps were slow now, cautious, though he wouldn't admit to himself that he was afraid. The forest had changed. The air was no longer fresh and welcoming, it was heavy and damp, clinging to his skin like a wet cloth. The trees stood tall and silent, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers. Every now and then, he glanced over his shoulder, half expecting the old woman to appear again. But she was gone, vanished, just like her strange warning. Then you are already lost, the words echoed in his mind, and for the first time that day, Kofi began to doubt himself. He had gone too far to hear the village sounds. No birds, no laughter, no drums, only the creaking of trees and the soft crunch of his sandals on the forest floor. He came to a fork in the path. One trail dipped down into darkness beneath a low-hanging canopy. The other curved upward, covered in vines and moss. Which way? He whispered, biting his lip. He chose the one that seemed easier upward and brighter, but it was a trick. As he climbed, thorns snatched at his clothes and scratched his arms. A branch snapped beneath his foot, and he tumbled, rolling down the slope until he landed in a muddy ditch. His legs ached, his hands were bruised. He looked around, no sign of the path. He was off it now, completely. Kofi, he thought, you should have turned back. Still stubborn, he stood up, wiped his arms, and started pushing forward again. That's when he heard it, a loud buzzing, like 1,000 tiny wings beating at once. Bees! A dark cloud of them burst out of a nearby hollow tree, drawn to the scent of his sweat and the motion of his limbs. Ah! Kofi screamed, running blindly through the trees. He swatted and stumbled, but the bees chased him, stinging his neck, his arms, his face. Tears filled his eyes, and pain burned through his skin. When he finally outran them and collapsed near a fallen log, he was covered in welts, shaking and gasping. And still, he was lost. The forest had no sympathy. No one came to help. There was only Kofi, alone with the sting of his own choices. The words of the old woman returned louder this time. The forest doesn't take kindly to those who ignore warnings. Kofi lay still for a long time, curled beside the fallen log, his breath shallow and his body aching from the bee stings. His face was swollen, his arms burning with pain. The fearless boy who once laughed at every warning now sat in silence, trembling. The forest was no longer exciting. It was no longer full of adventure. It had become a place of shadows, of trials, one that punished pride and swallowed the careless. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Kofi realized he had no idea how to get home. Every tree looked the same. The hidden path was gone. He stood slowly, wiping his teary eyes and limping forward, hoping to find something familiar. That's when he heard the sound of faint splashing of water. Relief lit up his eyes. A stream, he whispered. If I follow it, it might lead me home. But the forest wasn't finished with him. As he hurried toward the sound, he stepped onto a patch of soft earth. It gave way beneath his feet. With a cry, he fell into a deep pit hidden beneath a layer of leaves and vines. Thud! He landed hard, hitting the damp floor below. Mud clung to his legs. The walls around him were steep and slick. He tried to climb, but the sides crumbled under his fingers. He slid back down each time, exhausted and sore. Kofi, he shouted, "Help! Somebody!" But there was no answer, only the low hum of evening insects and the whisper of the trees above him. Alone in the pit, with night creeping in, Kofi finally broke down. He sobbed not from the pain, but from the regret. "I should have listened," he whispered. "I should have helped on the farm. I should have listened to Nana Aku, to Mama, to Papa." Tears rolled down his cheeks, mixing with the mud. Then, in the silence, something stirred inside him, a tiny spark of wisdom. He sat back, breathing deeply. Crying won't help, he told himself. I need to think. Remembering what his father had once taught him about climbing wet slopes, Kofi took off his shirt and tied it into a rough rope. He looped it around a thick root sticking from the wall. Step by step, he began to climb not with strength, but with patience. At last, he pulled himself out of the pit and collapsed on the ground, panting. The boy who never listened had begun to understand that lessons are often painful but necessary. The sky above the forest had turned a deep shade of purple, with only a sliver of fading orange on the horizon. Night was falling, and the air grew colder with each passing moment. Kofi sat in the dirt, bruised, scratched, and aching from head to toe. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about games, or dancing, or being the center of attention. He was thinking about home. "I want to go back," he whispered. "I want to go home." He stood up slowly, determined to find a way. His legs felt like wood, but he forced them to move. He followed the faint sound of trickling water until he reached a narrow stream. It wasn't the main river near the village, but it was something. He remembered that streams often led to larger rivers and rivers could lead him home. Kofi began walking alongside the water, carefully stepping over roots and ducking under low branches. The forest at night was no place for a child. Strange sounds filled the air, owls hooting, frogs croaking, twigs snapping in the distance. His heart pounded with every rustle, but he kept going. As he walked, the old woman's words came back to him again. "The forest doesn't take kindly to those who ignore warnings." He shook his head. "She was right," he whispered. "They were all right. Mama, Papa, Nana Aku, even Kwame and Amahol." He thought of his mother's warm voice, his father's firm hands, the elders' patient stories. Tears welled in his eyes again, but this time, they were not only from pain, they were from longing. "I'll listen now," he said out loud. "If I make it back, I'll listen." The moon rose slowly above the treetops, casting pale light along the path. It guided him gently, as if the forest, satisfied with the lesson it had taught, had decided to let him go. Hours passed before Kofi saw the first sign of home, a distant flicker of firelight through the trees. He gasped, "That's the village!" Summoning the last of his strength, he limped forward until he broke through the tree line. There, just ahead, stood the familiar huts of Akala. Voices shouted. A lantern swung toward him. "It's Kofi! He's back!" His mother came running, her wrapper flying behind her. She dropped to her knees and hugged him tight, tears pouring from her eyes. His father stood behind her, silent but relieved. Kofi said nothing at first. He was too tired to speak, but as they carried him home and tended to his wounds, he whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't listen, but I've learned." The whole village gathered, and even Nana Aku appeared, his face filled with quiet understanding. The boy who never listened had returned, changed by the forest and by the lesson only experience could teach. Back in the safety of his home, Kofi rested on a mat woven by his mother's hands. The pain in his arms and legs reminded him every moment of the adventure he had survived and the mistakes he had made. But it was more than pain that filled his heart. There was a new feeling stirring inside him, a quiet respect for those who cared enough to warn him. His parents sat beside him, their faces a mix of relief and hope. "Kofi," his mother said softly, brushing a stray hair from his forehead, "we worried for you. We only want you to be safe." "I know now," Kofi whispered. "I was wrong to run away and ignore your words." His father smiled, nodding. "It takes courage to admit when you've been stubborn." Over the next days, Kofi helped with the farm work, no longer sneaking away. He listened when Nana Aku shared stories, and even practiced the dance steps for the festival. His friends noticed the change. "You're really serious this time, Kofi," Amahol said, smiling. "I have to be," he replied. "I want to be someone you can all count on." Nana Aku called him again under the great iroko tree. "Wisdom is like water," the elder said. "It flows to those who open their hands." Your hands were closed, but now they are ready to receive. Kofi bowed his head. "I will listen." The villagers watched as Kofi worked with care, learned with patience, and spoke with respect. The boy who once ignored advice was becoming a young man who valued the voices of those before him. The harvest festival arrived, brighter and happier than ever. Kofi danced with joy, his feet moving with the rhythm, his heart full of pride, not because he was the star, but because he had grown. That night, as drums echoed and fires flickered, Kofi sat beside Nana Aku and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." The elder smiled. "Sometimes the hardest lesson is the one we teach ourselves." Kofi looked at the stars above and promised silently, "I will never stop listening." With the passing seasons, Kofi's transformation became clear to all in Akala. The boy who once ignored every warning and chased every distraction had grown into someone trustworthy and thoughtful. His stubbornness remained, but now it was tempered by humility and a desire to learn. Each morning, Kofi rose early to help his parents tend the fields. He no longer rushed off to play without finishing his tasks. When Nana Aku shared stories or gave advice, Kofi listened carefully, often asking questions to understand better. One day, as Kofi walked through the village, he saw a group of younger children gathered around the elder. They listened wide-eyed to Nana Aku's tale of the river goddess, Mami Wada. Kofi smiled and joined them. "Do you know the story of the boy who never listened?" he asked. The children shook their heads. "That was me," Kofi said softly. He told them about the hidden path, the old woman, and the lessons the forest taught him. The children gasped at the dangers and cheered when Kofi explained how he learned to listen. "Why did you listen now?" asked a small girl. "Because I realized that my elders speak from love and experience," Kofi answered. "Listening doesn't mean weakness, it means respect and wisdom." From that day, Kofi became a helper to the village elders. He guided the children, mediated small disputes, and helped plan festivals. The villagers came to see him as a young leader, one who carried the strength of youth with the wisdom of age. Even his parents felt proud beyond words. One evening, Nana Aku took Kofi aside and said, "You have become the man I hoped you'd be. Remember, wisdom is a journey, not a destination." Kofi nodded. "I will keep learning." And so, anew Kofi walked the dusty paths of Akala, one whose ears were open, whose heart was humble, and whose spirit was strong. On a cool evening, the villagers of Akala gathered once again beneath the great iroko tree. The fire crackled warmly, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Families sat close together, sharing food, songs, and stories. Kofi sat among them, no longer a restless boy but a calm young man. Nana Aku took his place at the center and began to speak. "Tonight," the elder said, "we share the stories that bind us. Stories of courage, respect, and the lessons of life." Kofi listened closely as Nana Aku told the tale of Mami Wada, the river goddess, and her warnings. He remembered his own journey, the hidden path, the old woman's warning, the trials in the forest. When the story ended, Kofi stood. "I want to share something," he said, his voice steady. The villagers turned to him, curious. "I was once the boy who never listened," Kofi began. "I thought I knew better. I ignored warnings and walked into danger. But I learned that wisdom comes when we open our ears and hearts." He looked around, meeting the eyes of young and old. "We all make mistakes, but it is how we learn from them that makes us strong. Listening is not weakness, it is the first step to becoming who we are meant to be." A hush fell over the crowd, broken only by the crackling fire. Nana Aku smiled proudly. "You have spoken well, Kofi. May your words guide others as the stars guide travelers in the night." That night, as the firelight danced on their faces, Kofi felt a deep sense of belonging. He was no longer alone in his journey. He was part of something greater, the village, the stories, the wisdom passed from heart to heart. And in that moment, beneath the endless sky, Kofi knew that his path forward would always be lit by the lessons he had learned and the voices he chose to hear. Months passed, and the seasons in Akala shifted as they always did, but this time, the rains did not come. The sky stayed clear and blue, the sun beating down harshly on the dry earth. The rivers shrank to thin trickles, and the crops in the fields began to wither. The villagers grew worried. Without water, their yams, maize, and cassava would fail. Without crops, there would be no food to celebrate the next harvest, and no food to sustain them. Kofi washed the drying riverbeds and cracked soil with a heavy heart. He remembered Nana Aku's stories and the importance of respecting nature and listening to its signs. One evening, during a village meeting under the iroko tree, the elders gathered to discuss what to do. "The drought will not end soon," Nana Aku said, his voice grave. "We must find water, or the village will suffer." Kofi stepped forward, his voice steady but humble. "Elder Nana Aku, you once told me about a hidden spring deep in the woods. A spring that appears only when the village is in great need. Maybe it can save us now," the villagers murmured, some hopeful, some doubtful. Nana Aku looked at Kofi and nodded slowly. "Then we must try. But the path is dangerous, and only those brave and wise should go." Kofi volunteered without hesitation. "I will go," he said. "I will find the spring and bring water back to Akala." A small group of villagers prepared to accompany him. Among them were Amahol and Quaim, his childhood friends who had always believed in his change. As the sun rose the next day, Kofi led the group into the forest, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The boy who once never listened was now a young man who listened carefully to the earth, the elders, and the lessons life had taught him. The forest greeted them with a quiet hush, the tall trees forming a green cathedral above. Kofi led the group carefully, remembering every twist and turn from his past wanderings. But this time, he listened to the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, and the stories whispered by the wind. Amaho walked beside him, her eyes alert. Quaim followed closely, carrying a small gourd for water. Hours passed as they moved deeper into the woods, searching for the hidden spring Nana Aku had spoken of. The sun filtered through the branches, and their feet crunched on dry leaves. Just as the group began to tire, Kofi stopped suddenly. "There," he whispered, pointing to a moss-covered rock where water trickled softly. "The hidden spring." They hurried forward and saw a small pool of crystal-clear water bubbling up from beneath the earth. The air smelled fresh and cool. Tears filled Amahol's eyes. "We found it." Kofi knelt and dipped his hands into the water, lifting it to his lips. It was pure, sweet, and full of life. But the forest was not finished testing them. A deep growl echoed nearby. Suddenly, from behind thick bushes, a large wild dog emerged, teeth bared and eyes fierce. The group froze. Kofi stepped forward, calm but firm. "We mean no harm," he said softly, recalling Nana Aku's advice to respect the creatures of the forest. The dog snarled once more but then hesitated. Kofi lowered his gaze respectfully and slowly backed away. The dog watched, then turned and disappeared into the trees. Relieved, the group quickly filled their gourds and prepared to return home. As they walked back, Kofi felt a new sense of pride, not from the danger faced, but from the wisdom gained. He had learned that listening was not just hearing words, but understanding the world around him. The hidden spring would save Akala, but the greatest treasure was the change in Kofi himself. When Kofi and his friends returned to Akala carrying the clear, life-giving water from the hidden spring, the entire village rejoiced. The drought's grip began to loosen as the crops revived and the river swelled once again. The people danced, sang, and celebrated the return of hope. But more than the water, the villagers celebrated Kofi the boy who had once never listened but had now grown into a wise and humble leader. Nana Aku smiled proudly as he watched Kofi help his neighbors and guide the younger children. The boy who had chased butterflies and ignored warnings now carried the weight of responsibility with grace. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the village, Kofi stood beneath the great iroko tree. The villagers gathered around him, eager for guidance and stories. "Remember," Kofi said, his voice steady and kind, "the greatest strength lies not in knowing everything, but in listening well. Our elders' words carry the wisdom of generations. When we listen, we grow. When we ignore, we falter." The children nodded, eyes wide. The elders nodded, knowing the future of Akala was in good hands. Years passed, and Kofi's story became legend, a tale told by firelight, reminding everyone that true wisdom comes from listening, respecting, and learning. And so, in the village of Akala, beneath the rolling hills and vast savannas, The boy who never listened became the man who listened carefully and led his people to prosperity and peace. The end.
Subscribe for more content.